Welcome to Virtual for Real, the Rapid Pipeline Podcast. I'm Max, CEO and co-founder at DGG, creators of Rapid Pipeline, and I'm honored to be your host. Follow me on a journey as we talk to thought leaders from the industry, exploring how they are already leveraging 3D digital twins and digital production pipelines today to benefit their companies and make them successful in the real world. On today's pilot episode, I am joined by Dr. Kristian Sons. Kristian has spent 9 years building up digital product creation pipelines at Adidas. He also looks back to a successful career in research at Airbus and the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. Let's get started. So, Kristian, really excited to have you here, and maybe tell us a bit about yourself and your journey in 3D and what got you to 3D digital twins and working with them.
Sure. Thanks, Max, for for inviting me and for the introduction. I'm Kristian. I worked in the field of digital twins since 2004, maybe, when I joined Airbus. And at that point in time, we didn't call it digital twin. We called it more like digital mock-up, where we said, hey, we want to test certain features of a plane, of a helicopter, based on the 3D model. And it's just not a model for one purpose, but for multiple purposes. So that was kind of a little bit where this idea was born, instead of having for each application a model to say we try to unify that in one twin of our real product. And that came then from Airbus to the automotive industry. I did then a little detour into the academic world, where the two of us then also met when I was working at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, and you for Fraunhofer, right?
Right. Yeah, that was actually cool. So something maybe worth mentioning to our audience is we both worked on declarative 3D frameworks back in 2013, 2014, and so on. We met at the ACM Web3 conferences, you presenting the XML 3D framework and I talking about XFreedom. And we see a lot of declarative 3D even now with things like Model Viewer, A-Frame, and so on, right? So we kind of
Absolutely.
we're digging into that more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, and also super interesting that the idea was to democratizing the 3D technology, right? And we're still kind of on that path to say, how can we now embed 3D more and more in every kind of use case without having always that knowledge required.
100%. So if I can summarize this maybe for the audience, and you let me know if that's a good summary. What we tried with democratizing was really making it possible in HTML to really have one tag that says, here's a model. And then with other tags and attributes, I can just customize how the 3D model behaves or is shown, right, or shaded and so on. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And the nice thing, it was embedded in a general purpose application like the browser, where you could now build any kind of application around the 3D model versus a specific CAD tool or application where you would do one specific task in one specific tool. So it has had already a lot of similarities to things we want to solve still today, right?
Yeah, and that's really exciting. Actually, seeing on the one hand, the technological foundation is there already for so long, but then why aren't we seeing more of these applications nowadays already, right? I think
Absolutely.
the problem is often on the content side, and we'll get back to that, as well as to what you said earlier, the ability to reuse a digital mock-up or digital twin for so many things. So maybe taking a leap forward now.
So
to the Adidas journey and how we've met the second time. Yeah.
the second time, yeah. So I then finished at the DFKI with my PhD, and then a old colleague from Airbus actually called, say, hey, we have here again this digital twin thing in fashion, but it's very different to automotive because we have this immense scale of products. Do you want to join a team to build this digital creation thing in Adidas? And this is where I spent now the last 9 years and really being the technical lead for what we call digital creation end-to-end, where we use the digital twin for multiple use cases. And this is then where we met the second time, where Rapid Pipeline then helped us in the automation steps of many of these processes.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. Yeah, that's a great summary. And
yeah, I just want to take that to maybe segue into a bit of a more deep dive into exactly that topic. Digital twins for digital product creation, the topic that you worked on now for 9 years, and you worked together also with so many other companies in the space, right? Trying to like find exchange knowledge, right? And like figure out how to accelerate that motion in the industry and help everyone do more with the help of these digital twins. So I would be interested if you can tell me maybe real quick, what is your definition of a digital twin again, and then what it is used for in the context of digital product creation. What are the use cases, and or can you categorize that somehow?
Yeah, and this is not easy. I think a lot of companies actually struggle with these digital twin idea because the digital twin, as let's start with the definition. Maybe a digital twin as something that is typically a 3D model where we carry a lot of business logic inside that 3D model, so that we can use it then for different kind of purposes. And of course, creating a digital twin is something that comes with a lot of effort. And if you then only use it for one value that you generate, then often the effort outweighs the value. So it's absolutely essential that you start using this in a more end-to-end fashion and for multiple purposes along the value chain. And this is, of course, something that is often hard to establish in a big corporate setup because a lot of different functions need to align on this concept of a digital twin. For me, it always helped to build a little bit of a framework where can we actually generate value around the digital twin. And I built myself a framework around 4 pillars. Saying on the one hand side, of course, creating in 3D, creating a 3D model during product creation brings a lot of value because you can do things that and here it needs to be clear that fashion and other consumer goods, it's not totally standard to work in a CAD program, right? And this means why should people hassle with 3D creation if it's also sometimes sufficient to draw a T-shirt on in Illustrator and send it to a factory and get back a physical sample. And in this area, we see a lot of advantages around computational design, for instance, where it's not so simple to draw an organic form, an organic shape. 3D printing is another one. So, and with AI tools also more where you can really create more creatively in 3D than previously, how you created previously. So that's pillar one.
So pillar one, if I try to summarize it myself, that was a great explanation. It's really about leveraging the power of digital tools for the creation and ideation process around a product. Okay.
Exactly.
And that makes so much sense. And I see Adidas adopting this, but also you're wearing a Hugo Boss sweater. I think that's another pioneer, at least in Germany, that's pioneering these workflows. So they're early adopters, right?
There are some early adopters, that is right. But I think everyone is adapting now to work in 3D for that purpose. The other value propositions is something that most brands only tapped a little bit into, right? There's always the idea to also tap into the other ones, but it's not that easy, right? And
yeah, so let us know, what are the other 3 pillars apart from empowering people who are in the product creation and design? So what else can I do with a 3D model once I have it?
Well, for me, one of the most exciting ones is really, and this is also where I have my passion is, you typically in fashion, you have a very long product creation cycle. Sometimes it takes like 18 months from the idea to the retailer. And then it's hard to predict 18 months before what our consumers would need in 18 months, right? And the digital model, of course, allows you, and we introduced a lot of these processes, allows you to talk with wholesale customers and test if what you want to create is actually something that is required. So getting feedback already on the digital twin is an essential one that can speed up everything, what we sometimes call closer to market, because in the end we can gather feedback either from wholesale or from our consumers. I think this is something where we tapped way too little into so far.
Well, if I can break that down again and try to just summarize what I understood, and I think this is super exciting. What you're saying is when you're, let's say, Adidas, you're creating a new shoe, and usually you would, in the past, have gone out and like brought that design to some people who actually manufacture that prototype, right? And then you wait, I don't know, 2 months, and you have like a physical shoe, and then you go with that physical shoe to some retailers, and then you do that 5 times. And out of these 5 times or so, they might say for 4 times, no, that's not the shoe we want to sell. So you're throwing away four, and you're throwing away a lot of time and money that went into this, basically. And now, with the digital twin, you can not only facilitate the design and creation process, but also the next step, which is showing it to stakeholders inside and outside your company and iterating with them before you have even built a single physical thing, right?
Exactly. You summarized it very nicely. I think it's really about this one. We discard so many ideas very late in the process, right? Of course, the digital twin today does not represent how a product feels and touches. This will not go away. That
Sure.
At some point in time you want to feel also the product, but you can earlier adapt or discard ideas and, as you say, spend less time. It's in the end a cost efficiency thing. It's what we call in software often a agile process. We get feedback earlier so that we don't spend too much time in something that is not required. So in the end, behind that point is actually a cost efficiency driver.
That makes so much sense. And like I'm super excited about this pillar as well. I have just a small anecdote from automotive that someone told me where they said they had a VR mock-up of a car, and they looked at it before actually on a photorealistic rendering. So they had a photorealistic picture, and then the manager who reviewed it, like was a really important stakeholder, was like shrugging a bit, and you could see that he was not really excited. And then he put on these VR glasses, and he saw the dimensions of the car, right? Which is super important. Like that's why they still create clay models often. It's because you want to experience the dimensions of that car next to you, right? Like often about, they say it's a sports car, it should be bold and like strong and like communicate something. And then the manager took off the VR glasses and was saying, thank God. It looked awful on the renderings, but now I get it. Yeah. So it's like this extra dimension, right? That you get with like even like a spatial like immersive setup, and of course the haptics, that's very hard to reproduce, right? How does the fabric feel? I guess you have other options for that, but like the more you can sort out before you produce it, the more you can push back the production step, right? The faster you are with your go-to-market.
Absolutely, and here you're already addressing a third pillar, where I say what we establish is to use the digital twin as the single source of truth, so that everyone is talking about the same thing across the whole value chain, right? Because previously we had different documents, we had different tables where we collect certain aspects of the product, but that means the different function all had something different in mind, and often everyone came only at the same page once we were in the prototyping phase. Now everyone is talking about the same thing really earlier, and here then again automation is key to let these new data, let real-time models, let rendered images flow into the different systems that are used by marketeers, by developers, by our factories, so everyone is really talking about the same thing. And this is a little bit hard to measure in a company, how you improve the company through this one, because it means less meetings, it means less errors. But how do you measure that? This is not so easy. But we've seen at Adidas, if once people experience to work in this digital way, they also didn't want to go back into the old way.
That makes so much sense, right? Because it's unlocking efficiency, and then once you have that process in place, you get used to it, I guess, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, if I can summarize, the first pillar is basically facilitating product ideation and creation, and then the second one is facilitating communication to stakeholders inside and outside the company, and the third one is having a single source of truth, right?
Exactly.
So then what is the fourth pillar? Is there even more that we can do with a digital twin?
Yeah, the fourth one is, I guess, the one with the highest potential currently also, or less the one that we have tapped the least into it. And that is then creating more content from the digital twin than we do today. I think it's pretty something maybe not everyone knows, that in any kind of advertisement, any video, any IKEA prospect, you don't see real models anymore. You see a part of what we call a digital twin, right? But in fashion, this is something that is not fully there yet. We still photograph, or we maybe scan for an AI experience a model, but we have not established this end-to-end process where we say in the end we want to use that product to also create content. And since we're not talking about a few tens or dozens of products, but like sometimes about 10,000, 20,000 per year, this is something that needs to be highly automated to really pay off. And this is again, right, where we work together also at Adidas to say, let's automate these processes in geometry creation, and how can I derive different kind of asset types from my digital twin for different purposes. And typically each purpose needs a different kind of derived asset type. And this is what you know, right? Also with your configurations to say, hey, for Shopify, I need maybe something else than for a different platform. And this is then the part where you also need to involve then sometimes third parties, content specialists into the product creation area. And this is something where which is really one of the unsolved problems.
Mm-hmm. Right, that makes so much sense. So basically what you're saying is here that once we have a single source of truth, right, and the digital twin is kind of approved by all stakeholders, we can leverage the digital twin to produce content more easily for all kinds of marketing channels, and maybe some that we couldn't even serve yet.
Yeah.
Because it was just too costly, right? And there's so much more that we can do, like, for example, configuration. We see this in the furniture industry, working with like clients there from RapidPipeline side, but also in fashion, right? It's so easy to swap in and out different colorways of something in a digital twin, then create virtual photo shoots of all these different colorways, or swap out the environment, right? You have like a flat that looks more urban for maybe a like young urban professional audience, and you have something that looks more like countryside for a little older audience that is maybe like more wealthy and like has a different kind of environment typically. So just making sure that you produce the content maybe in the future even dynamically, right? This is coming up now, like for the exact audience that you have. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about AI as well in a bit, but just like on this last point of like repurposing that content. So we have understood that when scaling up these workflows, we need automation, right? And there's a siloing problem usually inside big companies, right? Because all these workflows were separate. So once we want to establish end-to-end or single source of truth workflow, we run into problems. Could you comment more on that maybe? What is the problem? What the solution could look like?
Yeah, I see, and this somehow attributes also to the time where a lot of these industry also face certain times of crisis or certain times of shift. I think there was a lot of hope that the whole D2C business is growing more and more, but we see that this is not necessarily growing a lot from where we stand today. People go back into normal shops and don't buy necessarily only on the e-com offering. Still, we have so we are in a little bit of a crisis mode and need to be cost efficient. At the same time, the demand for content is increasing because it has also become very apparent that we cannot produce content only globally. We need to be very specific for specific markets, and a platform in China needs maybe and we know that there are platforms that need 3D content for the rating in the search engine, and of course you need to have these content then generated in an efficient way. If you only create 3D models for that specific use case, most probably it's too expensive and not cost efficient. If you use the digital twin for these multiple use cases, then you get into the situation where you can derive content for different markets, for different channels very efficiently.
That makes so much sense. I mean, I have just learned about this the past couple of years, right? Like before starting our company, I just had a consumer perspective, right? And behind the scenes, there's so much going on with, like, say, things like B2B showrooms, something that we don't really see as a consumer, right? And then you mentioned another example of like having customer facing 3D, right, in an online shop in e-commerce, and that even improving things like not only conversion rate, but also the search ranking maybe. So that's kind of exciting. I had no idea about it, honestly. Um, and I think it shows more and more how we can just leverage that single source of truth digital twin, like that third pillar,
Yeah,
um, in what you call the fourth pillar, right? Like
yeah,
repurposing it and therefore like maximizing the ROI, I
yeah.
think. Mhm.
And it goes even a step further, where you say then one is to create content for specific channels, but then it's really also the personalization of content, right? We see that sometimes now already that a vegetarian consumer gets different content than a non-vegetarian, because you as a brand know some features of your consumer. And then, of course, it requires content that is very flexible and adapting it to certain situations. And then, of course, we get also to the limits of where we scan things or build it through photography or other ways. Here, a digital twin, if done right, can do all these kinds of variations that you need to play out for different kinds of consumers, really individualized for one consumer.
And that's so powerful. And like, I think addressing the elephant in the room, right? Like, really looking at what happened with AI the past 2 years. I think when people say AI, they mostly mean things like I have an LLM or I have a neural network that somehow creates pixels from an input query, right? Um, how do you see with all these experiences that you like describe around digital twins and 3D DPC, where there's so much already solved, right? Um, how does this like go together with the recent developments that we have in AI? Is there some potential that you see? Is AI going to replace parts of that workflow? Is it going to complement them? Is it going to accelerate things, or is it too early? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I am super excited around the, in particular, the recent development in AI, because a lot of things of what we talked so far now is the technical things are solved, right? We were talking about how many years ago we were able to show great models inside the browser. Still, it's not your common experience in the browser, but the technical things are often solved. Now, where it becomes difficult is now to do the customer specific automations. And here, I think AI, in particular, agentic AI, gives us now the opportunity to automate and customize things specific for consumers without that we need to build a custom asset management or a custom whatsoever, custom pipelines, because the AI can really do that work of translating what you need into commands that the technology can do.
Well, I mean that I totally agree from everything that we're doing right now and that we're
Mhm.
seeing. That makes so much sense. So basically, taking a step back, you mentioned the word agent, right? So when we look at an LLM, it's basically a tool where you can feed in like ChatGPT, write a query, and we get something back. And yeah, the AI has a lot of context that makes it easier to understand what the user might want, right? Even if it's a fuzzy query. So that's something that I understand is valuable. And the agent, what is an agent in this context, right? Like, how does that come in? It's something more specialized, right? So we're basically going from like trying to solve everything with a silver bullet to something that's way more specific and trained to solve a certain quote unquote boring task. Is that's maybe would that be a summary that you would agree to?
Yeah, yeah, and this makes it so interesting, right? I think also in my Adidas time, every week there was an AI startup showing something super cool, but it could not solve how to embed these things into our processes, which are really specific brand by brand, retailer by retailer. And I now see the chance to say, hey, this boring part, this operational part that is missing to do all what we want to do, I mean, we're talking now about content, but of course, every brand thinks, hey, if we do the 3D model, we could use it somehow in a consumer-facing setup. But how to get there requires a lot of operational effort and very specific operational effort. And this is the hard thing to solve. And I think here there will be a leap step with these agents to say they can do the specialization for the customer, and I can naturally interact with that. I don't need to be a total expert on this one. So our standard users can operate such a complex environment, and that will be super exciting.
So basically solving the intermediate steps, the intermediate layers of complexity that make things just so complicated. Like, maybe we could give an example to the audience. Like, let's say something like 5 different Excel tables and no one understands how they work together, or like, is it that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of products, right? And if you now want to say, I want these 5,000s to be rendered in a specific style, I need to build thousands of filters, I need to do some batch processing or a big rule engine. Now with AI, I can just say, hey, render every style from that collection additionally in that style, and this is just a word that spawns in the background 10,000s of actions and needs to collect information from maybe 4 or 5 systems to be able to create that task, but the AI is able to orchestrate this work. And this is something that was really hard to solve and is now solvable with a single sentence, and that's super exciting.
I totally agree, and I think many of our audience also agree. We talked a lot about your past journey, and you said, like, when I was at Adidas, yeah, you just left Adidas. We didn't talk about that. May I ask, like, any plans for the future? I hear a lot of excitement about AI agents and a lot of know-how about like how the DPC industry works.
Yeah, I'm still super passionate about this whole problem statement, and I want to really help the industry to go that journey, solving these 4 pillars, right? And I think one of the big gaps is, I mentioned it a few times, is suddenly the brands have tens of thousands of these digital twins. We don't typically in fashion industry have PLM systems that are made for 3D, that are made for AI workflows. It doesn't mean that it will replace an PLM, but I think next to the PLM, also because it's not just product development, it's also content creation, you need also a system that orchestrates all these kinds of things. So what I will do, I am currently in the process of founding a startup that helps exactly in this area, saying a AI-first asset management system that helps brands to handle this amount of digital twins. That still communicates with the classical PLM systems, with the classical DAM systems for 2D images and so on. And there, of course, 3D automation is one incremental part. And this is why I'm so happy that we still have our touch point for a third touch point in our career, hopefully.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, thank you so much. And yeah, I know this, of course, already. So I'm really looking forward to working together on this and like just staying closely in touch. And if the audience is interested in getting in touch with Kristian, we'll also make sure we have something in the podcast notes, right? So that we can create the contact even before the foundation of your company. But I think it sounds like it will happen soon. It sounds like you're bringing a lot of knowledge about the industry, and it's really exciting to be part of this, like in my position at least, just knowing you and just following these developments. And we, of course, are also interested seeing what we can do to solve maybe the 4th pillar that you mentioned, which is like making that context usable everywhere. But yeah, thank you so much, Kristian. Like, this was extremely insightful. It was super interesting. It's a lot to digest and a lot of deep takeaways. And so I couldn't be more excited. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks again to be in your first episode, and best luck for the upcoming one. I will be one of your listeners, definitely.
Well, sounds exciting. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching and listening, everyone.